Hello, this is Ian Scales from ITU TelecomTV. I'm here this morning with Manish Singh. Manish is the VP of Field Engineering for Continuous Computing, and Continuous Computing is a specialist in DPI, that's Deep Packet Inspection, and Femtocells, and I'm going to be talking to Manish about Femtocells this morning. Manish, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you.
I'd like to ask you first, tell me a little bit about Femtos. I know you're going into the LTE side of the market, which is already emerging even before LTE's actually out in the field. Tell me how important Femtocells are to LTE.
Well, from our perspective, in Femtocell, we see it as very, very critical to LTE for multiple reasons. The most important reason is augmenting capacity, first of all. Putting smaller cells is the most cost-effective manner to augment capacity. Now, it does improve drastically the spectrum reuse. The other key element in certain parts of the world, primarily I would say North America, is the issues that we run into with coverage as well. The coverage gaps. And again, with the Femto, the operators now have a new tool in their kitty where they can address the coverage issue. In parts where they have much poorer coverage, and yet you have some sort of broadband backhaul. Coverage capacity, we see that as the starting point from an LTE standpoint. But long term, we also see that once Femto goes in the consumer's home, it becomes a very, very important platform for the network operators to launch what are called as Femtozone services.
Well, I think we spoke earlier and we were saying maybe with LTE, you're going to see for the first time that Femtos are being factored in to the deployment. In other words, you're not just launching an LTE network in a conventional sense, but you're taking account of the fact that you can put so many femtocells into the field, to pick up the transmission and so on, and to balance the load between the off-network load from the femtocells and the real network. Tell us a little bit about that. Are operators actually going to launch their femtocell strategy and their deployment at the same time?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, what we're seeing now is, if we compare to what happened in 3G or GSM, Femto was really an element that came as an after fact when the networks, to a large extent, were already rolled out. What changes with LTE is this is the first time where the operators now have the opportunity to really roll out their networks, which are more mixed, heterogeneous networks with both macro and Femto. And what I'm at least seeing from talking to different network operators is, as they're developing their rollout strategies, they see macro for citywide, nationwide coverages, but Femto essentially critical to augment capacity, to put it in the homes, in the offices, and essentially to offload a lot of the traffic. And all of this also, by the way, ties back into one of the key challenges the operator faces is how do you drive the price per bit down? Because we're seeing all these smartphones, netbooks, data cards, dongles all coming out, and yet, more often than not, if you look at the pricing plans, these are flat rate, all you can eat. So as this demand for data traffic goes up, the revenue is not catching up that fast. How do you drive the price per bit down to make sure that the networks remain profitable? And that's where we again see Femto playing a very, very key role for these operators.
Can you give us numbers? I mean, if we're talking about the Femtos offloading all this traffic from LTE, what proportion of the traffic do you think they're capable of taking off from what you know of deployment plans at the moment?
Two things there. I mean, one is in terms of, to your question of what percentage of traffic can be offloaded. A number of statistics and research on the topic of what's the percentage of calls, for example, originate from an indoor environment, inside the home, inside an office, or what have you. The numbers vary from 40 to 60%. Is the traffic that originates from the indoor environment.
So around about half, in fact,
exactly.
Probably.
Exactly.
Which is a massive amount, really.
It is.
Yeah.
And that's the traffic that can easily be offloaded onto these Femto networks. Part two to your question in terms of what do we expect in the market when the rollouts start happening. Frankly, I would say at this stage we are, first of all, seeing a whole range of commercial trials on the 3G side of things. For example, in North America, we've had Verizon and Sprint have commercially launched. AT&T just announced their first commercial trial. We're seeing in UK, Vodafone did their commercial launch. So we're now at a point where we're seeing different operators in different geographies pushing the technology out in a commercial manner. Next 12 to 18 months is the timeline when we expect major launches to happen and operators really pushing this out. LTE, the timelines are, again, by the end of this year in North America, at least we expect one operator to go for trial. There are multiple other operators in Japan and Europe lined up. And these operators, as they are continuing to formulate their strategies, one of the things, for example, Vodafone brought up is what's called as the metro zone. Right. It's really an extension of a femto concept.
So I think you'll be seeing different models too, won't you? It's not just a question of deploying these things technically, it's how you maybe revenue share with your neighbours, maybe use them in a broader way, neighbourhood femtos, etc.
Absolutely.
Different options there.
Absolutely, there are lots of different options. The one key thing to note here is, at the end of the day, Femtocell operates in a licensed spectrum.
Sure.
So we will see some MVNO-like models or RAN sharing models, but it operates in a licensed spectrum, so the operator who owns the spectrum at the end of the day has a very significant role to play.
Yes, his restricted role. I wanted to ask a little bit about the business of what you're doing, trying to sell femtocells. Presumably that's changing too with the change out to LTE. Has it become more of a software business rather than a hardware business now?
From our perspective, Ian, definitely. I mean, we're providing and licensing software for femto access points.
So you're licensing other vendors to build femtos and sell as well?
Very well put.
Is that the first time that's been done?
Yes, we've been the first ones in the market who have started offering complete software bundles for femto access points, as well as on the network side for femto gateways.
Right.
On the femto access point, we provide complete software, the entire package, including reference applications, management interfaces for remote device management and things like that. And it's essentially, we see it as a system on a chip model. Yeah. So we work in the ecosystem with some of the key silicon providers like PicoChip and others to really integrate the software tightly on these silicon platforms and provide it to the...
So given that that's the case, and presumably that's creating a real commodity market, what are the unit costs going to get down to for operators to distribute these? Give us a ballpark. I know that's a difficult question to answer, but...
Yeah, I mean, it's a question that always comes up, and everybody wants to know what's the price point. Yeah. I would say, frankly, I mean, without getting into the specifics of the numbers, but for this market to take off, eventually, femtos have to come down to sub-$100 price points, and frankly, in the long run, as the volumes pick up, these need to come down to $75 to maybe even $50 price points, right. Because at the end of the day, what we're talking about is consumer electronics. Sure. Where I see the market is today is we're very close to be touching that $100 magic number.
But it'll go a lot lower than that, surely.
It's a game of volume and bringing the cost down, right? As the volumes pick up, the prices will go down. Okay. And it's that chicken and egg problem. But again, the good news is different operators are already very close to commercial launches, and we expect the volumes to pick up.
Okay. Now, you mentioned consumer markets, because the other option for femtos, of course, is to become a licensed piece of software and a little bit of hardware, maybe an integrated chip, that goes into existing consumer electronics, things that are wanting to be the home hub. Can you see that market taking off, where femto capability sits along Wi-Fi in, say, a TV set-top box, for instance, or a router going onto the internet? We're going to get to that point fairly soon?
Yeah, I think we are going to get to that point fairly soon. What we saw is the market itself started as a standalone femto access point, a simple box. Consumer can get it, plug it in their broadband connection, and they have a little base station in their home. What we see now is the market is moving along to converged CPE devices, one box going inside the consumer's home. Multiple reasons for that. Price is, of course, one that we talked about. Yes, one integrated device, more opportunities to drive the price down. Operational costs for network operators, having multiple devices in a consumer's home, it does increase the operational cost and more truck rolls and things like that. So yes, we're seeing now the market where more and more integrated CPE devices are going to come in.
Okay.
residential gateway providers, set-top box providers, home hubs, and we're going to see a lot of this femto function getting embedded in those kind of devices.
So one last question then. What's the size of this market over the next 5 years?
Well, to answer that question, first of all, the total addressable market long term from our perspective is you've got some 4.6 billion wireless users. Over time, we see that as the total addressable market.
Yes.
However, it's going to take long to get there. Subset of that is around 8 to 10% of this 4.6 billion are mobile broadband users today, according to GSMA.
Right.
We see that segment today as completely a addressable market for femto access points. But again, frankly, we expect that in the next 12 months, we are going to see tens of millions of unit shipments ramping up to hundreds of millions of units shipments.
So quite a large market.
Yes, absolutely. It's a consumer market. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, Manish, thank you very much for that. It's very interesting.
Thank you, Ian.